The natural inclination when you get an offer on your house or another piece of real estate is to really only look at one element of the offer, which is the price. Now, the price is important, but there are 10 other elements of an offer that I'm going to give you that you need to look at when deciding whether to accept or reject an offer. Okay, here's the first one. The timeline and the closing speed. How quickly can the buyer close? In most cases, a quick close is good. There's less things that can go wrong if you close quickly. Now, in some cases, like my parents are doing this right now, they're selling their house. They actually want a longer close because they want to have more time to move and kind of have a relaxed transition toward their new place. So whatever it is, figure out what matters to you. If you want to close quickly or if you want it to take a longer time, that's totally up to you and your situation. But you need to look at what their close date is, as well as, if it exists, which we'll get into later, what their inspection period is. Okay. Secondly is the financing terms. There's a million different loan products out there. We're not going to get into what each of them is or who uses it on this podcast, but just understand, if you're with a good agent, they should be contacting the lender for the buyer that you're working with and really grilling them a little bit. I mean, of course, you should have a pre-approval letter, but you want to make sure that this person is going to be able to close. And there's different loan products that have more stringent requirements and more things that can go wrong than others. So you want to see what type of financing they're using, if they're using financing. The alternative on financing terms is if they're all cash. So in that case, you don't have to worry about the loan product. Of course, you don't have to worry about the property appraising or anything like that. They're cash. They may still ask for an inspection or things like that, but it does remove some variables that can go wrong, and it is generally considered to be a stronger offer when they're all cash. We talked about this. I've alluded to it a little bit. The third thing is contingencies. A common one is an inspection contingency. I mean, that's pretty normal. Most people aren't going to waive inspection, so don't be alarmed if somebody asks for an inspection. I mean, there were cases when the market was really, really competitive where buyers would just waive it to try to get in ahead of others when there was like 10 offers, but now it's a pretty even market. So inspection contingency is normal. Just make sure it's not a really long inspection period. That's a little bit of a red flag. It really, in most cases, there's no reason that it should be more than 10 days probably. And if it's more than 10, we're going to get into what that could mean a little bit later in this episode. The other typical contingencies, I mean, you can make anything a contingency, but the classic ones, the typical ones are, of course, the financing contingency as well, which we touched on. With the loan, it's a financing contingency just means is if my loan doesn't get approved for whatever reason, I can get out of this transaction with, no harm, no foul. So again, generally speaking, the fewer contingencies, the stronger the offer. A contingency is it's very simple. It's a way for a buyer to get out of the purchase. And so less of those is generally good for you if you're the seller. Number 4, the earnest money deposit. A lot of people don't look at this one that closely. Really, if you have a good agent and you're selling on market, your agent should know that really most offers should be a minimum of 1% earnest money. Where you don't see this as much as off market. You will see people, they'll get, they'll come in with the price you want, but they will only put like $100 down in earnest money. And a lot of people who aren't in the business, they only sell a few houses in their lives. They don't even look at that. They're just looking at the total price. What does it mean when there's only $100 down? It means you're working with a wholesaler. We could do a whole episode about what wholesaling is, but what it means is the person who's only putting $100 down, they probably also have a clause, a contingency in their contract that says no matter what happens here, no matter, however this thing goes, the only thing that I can lose is my $100. Okay, so they have very little skin in the game. We're talking about a multi-$100,000 transaction, and they've got $100 of skin in the game. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're not necessarily anti-wholesaler. The important thing though is to be aware of it. The person that's buying this, that's only putting $100 down, they are not closing on the house themselves. They are wholesaling it, which means they are going to find another buyer who actually has the money, and they're going to take the difference on that transaction. So, quick example, we won't do a whole wholesaling episode, but let's say this person comes and offers you $300K for your house, and they put $100K of earnest money down. They are wholesaling. What they will do is they will go find another buyer who will pay $320,000 for the house. And they make that spread of $20,000 essentially for finding a buyer. Again, that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's up to you, but you need to be aware of it. If the earnest money's that low, that's in all likelihood what's going on.
Hey guys, we're taking a quick break, but before we get back into it, if you're enjoying this episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us to keep bringing you more valuable content. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget to leave a review. Please, it makes a huge difference. All right, let's get back to it.
Here's another one. This one's really hard, and it's not actually on your contract, but buyer reputation and track record. This is really tough to check into in the single family home space because there's so many buyers. The bigger deals you get into, multifamily and large, big apartment stuff, the pool of fish that are swimming in that space is a lot smaller, the bigger you get. And reputation does matter. So if you get an offer from somebody, you can make some phone calls, especially if you're in a smaller market, particularly. People all kind of know each other. They'll know, does this person have a history of flaking on deals or asking for ridiculous credits or repairs at the last minute, so that stuff is important. Okay. Reputation is a big deal. Anybody can make a big offer, but if they go in and try to retrade you later in the deal, that is something you need to be aware of, and it makes their big offer kind of obsolete. Number 6, will they be purchasing as is? Now, this is a weird one. They can put it as is in the offer. In Oregon, you still get an inspection period. So somebody can say they're buying it as is, then they'll go in and do the inspection, and they'll ask for $40,000 in repairs or credits. So that's one I wouldn't pay a ton of attention to. It's BS a lot of the time. Number 7, assignment clauses. Let's go back to what I was saying, number 5, about wholesaling. So an assignment, that just means you can assign the contract. You can wholesale the contract. That example I used before, buy for $300, find another buyer for $320, pocket the $20K in the middle. Now, one thing to know, in the state of Oregon, preface, I'm not an attorney, but in the state of Oregon, every contract is assignable unless otherwise noted. So they don't even need to explicitly state that it's assignable. You'll see some people will do it. We've assigned contracts before, so we'll put Saucetown Properties LLC and or assigns is the typical verbiage that you use. But you technically don't even have to put that, because all contracts are implied to be assignable. So if you don't want your contract to be assignable, you need to explicitly state this contract is not assignable. If you're the seller, again, you have to explicitly state that, because if you don't, it's implied that it is assignable, and your buyer, again, the guy or gal who's probably only put $100 in earnest money down, can assign your contract. Okay. Number 8, seller concessions or extra stuff like that. A typical one on this is help with the closing costs. You'll hear people ask for, I want you to pay 10 grand of my closing costs. I want you to pay 3% of the purchase price of my closing costs. That's the typical one. Some others, you might get people who ask for, you to leave certain appliances in the house, or they like a piece of furniture, or you can really ask for anything in this situation, but the most common one is help with the closing costs. So it's important to pay attention to that, right? We started this episode telling you, most people just focus on what the offer price is, but what number actually matters, not the offer price. It matters how much goes in your pocket at the end of this. And so anything that you give up in covering somebody's closing costs or covering repairs, that is straight to your bottom line. That comes out of what you were going to get at closing. Again, this is stuff you can negotiate. It doesn't mean you should say no to somebody just because they want some help with closing costs, but you need to be aware of it. And if you're working with an agent and they're a good agent, they should be very, very aware of it. Number 9, post-closing possession or rent back. You'll get this sometimes. This is actually more if you're the buyer. You may get a seller who wants to continue living in the house for a little bit after closing. They may ask you if they can do it for free, or they may offer to pay you rent. And a typical example of this might be somebody, let's say they're selling their house and you make them an offer to close on June 1st, but they're buying another house that doesn't close till July 1st. They might ask to rent it back from you for a month. Again, this isn't a reason to not do the transaction, but you do need to know about it. You need to know how it works. And then our last one, this is kind of a blanket statement. It's not really something that's on the contract, but just the overall certainty of closing. Okay, a big offer doesn't mean anything if they can't perform on it. So I give you a lot of elements to look for in the first 9 bullet points of this episode, but keep that in mind. The highest offer is not always the best offer. Okay, price is one element, terms are the other. A lot of this stuff I'm talking about has to do with terms. And terms, if you do your homework, are going to tell you the likelihood that this person is going to close. We've all been there before. Somebody, and it's a really hard part of real estate, because if you're the seller, the second that you accept an offer from a buyer, they kind of have you by the what. They can tie your property up for an extended period of time. You can help mitigate that by doing a short, inspection periods should be 10 days or less. But once they have you it's called going under contract, you've accepted their offer, they can ask you for anything that they want. They can make ridiculous asks about, I want credits, I want repairs, I want this, I want that. Just know when that happens, and it will happen because they are playing with house money. Okay. If you accept their offer and they do the inspection and they ask you for 50 grand in repairs, the worst thing that can happen to them is you say no. Their original offer is still effective, and they can just go back to that. So they are playing with house money. Don't be surprised when they ask you for the world, because they have no reason not to. So those are the 10 elements. I know we all look at price, and it's of course very important, but those are the 10 other elements of a contract or an offer in real estate that you should be aware of and should be taking a look at.
That is a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Saucetown Investor. If you got value from this, drop us a comment and let us know your thoughts. Did you have a big takeaway? Is there a topic you want to see us cover next time? Is there a guest you want to see interviewed? DMs are open. Business is at Saucetown Properties, and my personal, you can DM me personally, is at the real Matt Cox 4. We'd also like to ask you kindly to please like and subscribe. You can also follow along with the Saucetown Investor blog. That's mattcox444.substack.com. Thanks again, guys, and until next time, keep investing and stay saucy, Saucetown.